Well, in essence, is that people use various kind of mental shortcuts when they make decisions, and that most of the time that works fine, but it means they're subject to errors. It means that you can make mistakes, and it has big effects in commercial markets, so it has implications for how you regulate commercial markets. But it has lots of implications for public policy too, in terms of how people make decisions around their lifestyle, impacts for health, crime, economic growth, in fact, pretty much every policy area. Well, a key challenge is that human psychology is very complicated. So there's many influences on behaviour, and even in our own heads, there are many different effects which kick in at any given time. So you can't be sure how any given intervention will work. So we're very experimental in how we work. We start on small-scale trials. We often have multi-arm trials, in fact, on any given area when we change a letter or whatever it will be, and then we figure out what works and what doesn't. And it's important to bear in mind, therefore, because of that it's a young science as a policy tool, certainly, that sometimes things don't work, and indeed sometimes things can even backfire. And so you have to persuade your ministers that's going to be okay, and that's what you're going to expect. Well, the opportunities, that's a great thing about it, is that are very great, particularly in a place like the UK, but many countries where there's a reluctance to use lots of mandation and more regulation, and there's not much money. So they potentially offer very low-cost tools in order to effect change, and often in a less intrusive way than conventional policy tools. What's really great, actually, is that in the UK now, over the last year, we've been trying out a lot of this stuff, and we have very hard results. You can see very big impacts. You know, you can change a letter and get a threefold increase in the number of people who pay a tax or whatever, or a threefold increase in the number of people who insulate their homes, or changes on health behaviour, etc. And yet without using a kind of aggressive tool or legislation. So that's got a lot of people very interested and excited, not only in the UK but in other countries too. My advice to kind of public sector manager, indeed private sector, is that often the details matter greatly. So while we have big set-piece arguments about welfare reform and, you know, that become very controversial, it turns out that lots of the nuts and bolts of processes, the design of the form, the detail of a process, can be incredibly consequential to what happens. So the guy in the basement who no one's interested in, who deals with the details of the form, may be the most important person in the building. And so that's quite a radical kind of insight to have, a big implication, but gives you a lot of remit to find new areas of having impact on policy with low cost, and hopefully making it easier for citizens too.